One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. You are in for an extra special treat today, because if you are starting a brand new platform this next year, right? When I'm recording this, we're at the end of 2022 and we're looking out at 2023. And I know that this is usually when people are like, I'm going to start a podcast next year. I'm going to create my YouTube channel. I'm going to do my blog. Well, if that is you, like maybe you've already been creating content and you're going to add something new to your business or your platforms, or you are doing this for the very first time, today's episode is going to be so helpful, because I wanted to take you back to where I was in 2018 when I started, which is super crazy because it will be 5 years that I've been doing this in 2023. And I'm looking back at what are some of the top things that I wish I would have known back then. Like if I could go back in time and time travel and say, Crystal, if you're going to do anything, do these 3 things before you get started or as you start growing out your content. That is what I'm sharing with you today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so we are just going to dive right in. And I wanted to kind of give like my disclaimer for this, because there's some people that listen to this podcast that aren't in either the education or like a digital business, online business space. And the rules that I'm giving you today, the guidelines, I should take that back. Like, let's cut that out. Rules is not a thing, because I think that there are no rules when it comes to creating content. There are guidelines that we all kind of live by, but at the end of the day, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? Like this is true. We just all know this. But I typically speak to an audience that are in the education, like how to business, like you are trying to support people in education capacity, right? Like I know several of you, like let's take Amanda, for example. She was recently on the podcast. She helps home bakers get their business up and running and she helps them make more money. And it's very educational and like step by step. And this is how you do this. And this is like, A, B, and C. So this is typically the listener of this podcast. But if you are listening to this show and you have never created anything, I really want you to take that kind of spin on it into the equation as I explain these out, because the rules, quote unquote, the guidelines that I'm going to share with you today aren't going to be applied the same if you have purely educational content. Not educational, entertainment. That's what I meant to say. If you are a comedy podcast, for example, it's not going to apply the same to you. I mean, some of it will, I guess, but it just won't be the same way. Or if you have a different style of podcast or something, like it's just going to be looked at differently. And I wanted to be very clear that the rules, again, I keep saying rules. I don't know why, because I never say rules. It's like stuck in my head. It's like, don't say rules, don't say. Of course I'm going to say rules because I said don't say rules. But the guidelines I'm going to share with you today are really for people that are helping people, steps 1 through 5. This is how you do it. Let's hit the ground running and go. So throwing those out there, because I know we have a few new listeners to the podcast. So welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. And I wanted to throw that out there because maybe you're listening. You're like, oh, this isn't for me. I'm going to turn it off. That's cool. I mean, I'd love for you to keep listening, but I get it. But I want to talk about these 3 things. So these are the top 3 things I would do for all of these platforms. I'm not singling out podcast, YouTube, and a blog. We're all going to wrap them in together because you can do all 3 of these things in each type of platform. And I think it's going to be really, really helpful. So again, if you're a podcaster who's going to start a YouTube channel this year, or you're a blogger who's going to start a podcast, like I want you to look at all these different elements and see how you can apply them to your content. All right, you ready? Let's dive in. All right, so number 1, this is the most important one. The other ones are pretty important too. Obviously, it's why I'm going to talk about them. This is the one that I'm going to focus on most because even though I've been doing this for close to 5 years, I'm still constantly learning. I'm reinvesting in myself. I'm reinvesting in my business all the time. And this is the thing that I'm like, ooh, I need to be better at that. And it's storytelling. So number 1 is storytelling. And the way that I see it is you want to have someone to listen to your podcast, watch your YouTube, or read your blog post. You want them to have a visceral reaction, some sort of reaction when they're listening to your podcast, watching your video, or reading your blog post. Like you want to make a call to action, right? You want to have your CTAs in there be so compelling that someone has to stop what they're doing and do the thing that you asked them to do. Like if you said, go follow me on Instagram right now, they're like, duh, yes, of course I'm going to do that. Or go get on my email list. Absolutely. Why would I not? I'd be an idiot if I didn't do that. Or, whatever your CTA is, you want everything leading up to that point to be so compelling that they're like, absolutely, I'm going to do it. And this is where I want to give you the caveat, right? Because to be fair, storytelling is complicated, okay? And I say that because it's actually the simplest thing in the world. It is. Like storytelling has been around for millennia, right? It's been around forever, but it's also an art. It is something that not everyone can do really well. And you know those good storytellers in your life. Maybe it's someone in your family. Maybe it's in your circle of friends. Maybe it's your mentors or people that you look up to that are like your virtual people that you follow. But you know a really, really good storyteller. I can actually think of being in the crowd at a conference and someone's up on stage and they're, giving their talk, they're doing the thing. And I'm just like, I remember like I've had people make me cry. I've had people make me laugh so hard I'm going to pee my pants. Like all of that, it's storytelling. It wasn't that they were giving me the secret sauce to A, B, and C. It was their storytelling. And if it were easy, everyone would have compelling content that knocks the socks off of our audience every single time. But the reality is you and I both know that that is not happening today, right? Not everyone is a good storyteller, but it's an art form. It's a practice. It's a skill. It's something that you can get better at. And it's something that I am actively very aware of storytelling in my content today, more so than when I was just getting started, which is why I think that this is very, very timely to add it to this episode, because while I'm actually in the trenches studying storytelling, getting better at it, I'm practicing it, it was not even on my radar. In 2018, it was not on I was trying to get other people to tell their story really well. And I was very much like, oh yeah, like I think that that's cool, but let's just, A, B, and C. Like let's just give them the how to. Let me just give them the bones of what they need to know. And it's kind of boring. It's kind of boring. Everything kind of falls flat if you're too just rigid and you don't give someone something meaty, like something that they can really sink their teeth into. If you don't do that, your content may not be shareable. It's definitely not going to be worth remembering, because I only remember the stories that were so good that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I remember that Zafira Rajan, like I heard her talk at Amy Porterfield's Entrepreneur Experience 2 years ago at this point, I think it was. And I still remember her talking about her eyebrows. Like, oh my gosh, like it has nothing. I can't even tell you what she talked about. I think it was like a sales page training. She's a copywriter. So I'll link to her episode in the podcast. She was actually here on the podcast, but she was talking about her eyebrows. And it's funny because I know a little bit of the behind the scenes, because Heather Sager, who is one of my really good friends, she helped Zafira come up with a lot of the talking points in her talk that day. And I remember Heather saying something like, oh man, I was so freaking proud of her for nailing that story, because I knew it would resonate. I knew that it would hit this audience like right between the eyes, like pun intended, right? Eyebrows, all the things. And it was just so good. And it worked. Like it worked. Storytelling works. So I bet you're probably thinking of podcasts you've listened to, YouTube videos you watch, like blog posts that you've read, where the story is so compelling. So if you're brand new to content, here's what I want you to do. Even if you're seasoned, right? Even if you're seasoned and you've never had this element of storytelling in your content before, this is what I want you to do. I want you to make your outline like you would typically do for a new podcast episode, a video, a blog post. I want you to list out the things that you want to talk about. Then ask the question, what stories do I have to share about this? It could be a personal example of something that you've gone through. It could be a story from a client or a customer that you've worked with in the past. It could be from someone that you've learned from or admired, but you need to include a story in every single piece of content that you create. So all the content we've talked about here today, like all that aside, I try to put a story inside every single email that I write. I've been trying to include it more in my social post. I have been trying to incorporate storytelling every single place that I'm creating content, because it matters. It absolutely matters. And here's a great example. Okay. I've already told a few stories here, but this is very, very applicable to what we're talking about today, because I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts. I love Armchair Expert. It is fascinating to hear Dax and Monica. Monica and I have so much in common, and I feel like we're going to be best friends when we meet in real life, in real person. So I'm throwing that out into the universe, but we're very, very similar in so many different ways. But when Dax interviewed Mark Rober recently on the show, so hang on, let me back up. So if you don't have kids in your house under the age of 15, if you don't have or know kids that know who, you won't know who Mark Rober is. You're like, who? Like, I don't even know who you're talking about. But if you do, you have kids in the house, you're like, oh yeah, that's the YouTube science guy that does crazy experiments on his channel. Like, probably you may not know exactly who he is, but if you go because I'm going to link to some of his videos in the episode description. So crystalprofit.com/episode 381. But I'm going to link to Mark because he's so awesome. I love his videos. I love that my kids love his videos. But I was listening to his interview today, and here is what he said, because Dax had asked him about the key elements of his videos since he's had so much success. So he has 23 million YouTube subscribers and all kinds of other like really cool brand deals. He has a fantastic business that he's doing. But Dax was like, what are some of the things that you've done that has led to your success? And Mark said this: storytelling. I tell stories that elicit a visceral response. That's really hard to say. That elicit a visceral response. And that's why I'm sharing this here with you today, because I feel like I'm in this like mindset where I'm thinking about storytelling constantly. If I would have heard this interview probably 6 months ago, I wouldn't have picked up on that. I really wouldn't have. I would have heard it and been like, oh yeah, that's great. We all, as a marketer, I know storytelling is important, but I'm very hyper aware of storytelling right now. And to hear him say that, I was like, oh no, I need to share about that because it's so, so, so important. Because he was talking about if you don't have an actual response to it, whether it's to frustrate you, make you laugh, like make you sad, make you happy, like all the most basic human emotions, like you want to elicit those in your content because that is what compels people to share it, to have opinions about it, to tell other people about it. And it's how you're going to get your name out there with your content. So not only do I agree with Mark, but I'm going to take his advice and add it to more of the components of my content, like moving forward. All right. So that is number one. Storytelling is so, so, so important. Number two, SEO.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
You're like, Crystal, can you just shut up about SEO? Can we stop talking about SEO? And somebody is laughing right now because like you feel seen, you feel called out. You're like, oh my God, would everybody stop talking about SEO? No, I won't. I can't. I cannot stop talking about SEO because SEO has helped my content so much over the last almost 5 years and whatever content you're creating. So SEO, if you're like, what is that? I don't even know what that means. Search engine optimization. This cannot be an afterthought. It cannot be something that you're like, oh, well, I'll figure that out in 6 months. I'll figure that out. But no. It was cute to ignore SEO back in the day, like I did, because I'm being called out here by myself. I was almost 12 months into my podcast before I really understood the concept of SEO. I kept saying like, oh yeah, I know what that is, but I would ignore it. And I just kept saying, oh yeah, like that's for bloggers. And I'm not really trying to blog. I'm trying to do a podcast. I'm trying to, no. Unless you have thousands of dollars to spend on ads every single month, you're going to be struggling to get your content out there in front of people. I'm calling it what it is. Unless you already have an established like social media presence or you have a huge email list, like if you don't have all these other factors, like if you're literally starting from zero, you have no audience whatsoever, it's going to be a struggle if you are ignoring SEO, because SEO can be your best friend. Oh my gosh. And it takes a while. It is a long game strategy, but SEO is key to focus on while building your content platforms. Because unfortunately, discoverability is the name of the game in content. And I say unfortunately because all the incredible things that you are creating won't get seen if you don't have the right titles. So you could spend hours, you could spend weeks or months creating an incredible YouTube video, creating just the perfect blog post for your audience, creating an amazing mini series for your podcast. But if you don't title it, yes, that's all that hard work, and it all comes down to the title. Yeah, it kind of does. It does. And this is why I'm saying it's like a good news, bad news situation, because it is the name of the game. But the good news is you can learn it. You can learn it, because the worst thing, if you've worked your ass off to create your content, and I see y'all, I see so many of you working so hard to create these incredible things for your audience, but no one, I repeat, no one will be able to consume your incredible content if they can't find it. If they cannot find it, all of your hard work goes straight down the drain, straight down the toilet. And that is just, it makes me so sad. It makes me so sad. So learn SEO this year. Put it on your vision board. I know that sounds so stupid. You're like, Crystal, I'm not going to put the letters SEO on my vision board. Well, you should. If you need to learn it, you need to put it on your vision board, because you need to bring some of that goodness into your life. It is the best gift that you can give yourself, your content, and your business. And actually, this episode is airing around the holidays. So if someone asks you, what do you want this holiday season? You can tell them you want a course that teaches you the SEO basics, right? I know you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be like, oh, I need to go get a degree in SEO and be like the blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. You don't. But you do need enough information, enough knowledge about SEO to make an impact as you build your content, as you're building these platforms, your podcast, your YouTube, your blog. You need SEO. Like, it is just the name of the game. So it's not cute anymore. If you're like, oh, I'll figure it out later, I'll think about it, whenever I've got my stuff together and I have an audience, that no. Do it now. Do it today, especially if you're just starting. But if you've been in this for a while, the good news is you can go back. Like, it's not like SEO has an expiration date that allows you to only do it when you first publish a piece of content. No. I've gone back to pieces of content where I'm like, that was a terrible title. What was I thinking? Let me change it. And it actually changed how a video performed on YouTube. So you can absolutely go back and change these things, tweak them, make them better. If you have well-performing blog posts on your website and you're like, oh, you know what? If I just changed this one thing, it would make this a piece of evergreen content that could work for a 2022 audience, even though you published it in 2018. Like, it's that powerful. It truly is. So learn SEO, get the basics down. Again, you do not have to be an expert in it, but you need to have some knowledge. So set aside some time. Put it right now. Like, if you're planning your 2023 calendar, put put like a few weeks. Okay, we'll just give it that. A few weeks in the new year where you are going to brush up on SEO. You're going to say, all right, I'm going to learn the basics. I'm going to learn how to apply it to this platform. And I want to know enough about it that I can be dangerous and I can start applying it in all the different pieces of my business and in my content. All right, so that was number 2. Number 3. And this one's important too. Like I said, all 3 of these are super important, but this is the one I wanted to end on because it is so important to me. And that is to have fun. To have fun. If you're in the process of launching a brand new podcast, a brand new YouTube channel, a brand new blog, like, I know so many of you, because I've had people go through radical repurposing. This is my program that I launched in 2022, and my profit podcasters that are here. Like, there's so many of you that have gone through these programs, and I know that you are gearing up to launch really big stuff in 2023. But as you're doing this, maybe you're hitting some roadblocks, right? Maybe you're like, gosh, I just don't know if I'm going in the right direction. Maybe you have Ross from Friends like screaming in your ear right now saying, pivot, because you don't know if you're going in the right direction. Give yourself some grace. Like, there is a steep learning curve in some of these things. Like, if you're starting a YouTube channel and you've never edited a video in your life and you don't have the money to afford an editor right now, so you're literally doing everything yourself, give yourself some of that grace where you can just be like, you know what? I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to make some mistakes. Like, things may be hard, like, as you get going and you're growing and you're doing everything. But at the end of the day, you should be having more fun than not, okay? Like, fun should be happening more often than it's not. And if you're like, well, Crystal, like, I literally just got started and I'm already not having fun, what do I do? What do I do? Because a few things could be happening. Perfectionism, imposter syndrome, like all the isms that can really hold us back happens in the very beginning. And I get this. Like, this is something that it's happened to me. It happens to so many of my peers. Like, I know it happens in this community too. But this is what I want you to do, okay? There's two things that I recommend. If you are already not having fun and you're like, how do I infuse more fun into my brand, into my content? The first thing I want you to do is ask yourself, how can I make this more about my audience and less about me? Because when you do that, something switches in our brains where it's no longer like, oh, this is the Crystal Profit Show. It's more of, this is the Profit Podcast community where I'm serving other people and it's not about me. It's not about me sounding stupid in a podcast episode. It's not about me fumbling over my words and saying something like, oh my gosh, like, why did I say that? It was such a dumb story. Or I, fumbled over my words, which this happens a lot, and I don't edit them out. I don't think you should either, because if we were actually having a conversation at a coffee shop, this is how I would sound. So I don't edit that stuff out. But how can you make it less about you and more about your audience? When we shift that focus, fun kind of happens a lot more naturally. It's why I throw in the fun, friends isms. That's not a word. I just totally made that up. But, like pivot. I actually have my friend's mug right here. I just had my Central Perk coffee mug on my desk right before I started recording. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love Friends so much. I talk about The Office. I talk about Game of Thrones. I talk about Armchair Expert. Like, that's how I infuse fun for me, because I love content, any type of content. And so I love that I can talk about my favorite movies. I love that I can talk about TV shows, podcasts, YouTube channels. Like, I love to do all those things because it does kind of bring all those elements together. It's me telling stories, and that is how I have fun. It's sharing those pop culture references with you because it makes it about you. It makes it about us and not about me as a podcaster, like trying to hold like the weight of this podcast success on my shoulders. No, don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Make it more about your audience and less about you. And then this is the second thing I would recommend. If you're like, I'm not having fun, what do I do? See where the fun stops in your processes, and then ask the question, do I need to be doing this in the process, or can I outsource it or not do it altogether? I've mentioned this before because this is literally what I do. I notice, I'm very self-aware of when I'm not having fun, when I'm frustrated, when I'm overwhelmed, and I ask those questions a lot. I don't continue to be pissed off or frustrated or overwhelmed. I say, I am really good at pausing and saying, wait, I'm feeling really overwhelmed by this, or I am not happy doing this. What can I do to change? And sometimes everything is out of my control and I'm like, okay, this is a temporary situation. If it's not a temporary situation, then it's a red flag for me to like really evaluate what's going on. But most of the time, if it's 100% out of my control, I just say, this too shall pass. This is temporary and things will change. It's seasonal or it's cyclical and I know I won't have to deal with it. Let's call what it is, taxes. Let's be real, okay? Taxes, we got to do them. I just say it's temporary. Only got to do it, and then we'll be done. The fun stops at taxes, but then we're good to go. But outside of that, if it's something that is in my control, and I'm like, you know what? I just really, really hate booking people back and forth on the podcast. This was a big pain for me when I was first getting started. And I was doing emails back and forth and I would give them like 3 days. I'm like, oh, here's 3 days and I have this time slot. And then they'd throw something at me and, we'd be emailing back and forth. And then I found Calendly, which is a tool that I use in my business that does all of my scheduling for me. It looks at my calendar and it like literally pulls, I'm like, oh, boom, done. So there was no more back and forth. That was the part where I wasn't having fun. I found a tool that would help me. I outsourced that task to a tool that allowed for me to bring that fun back into my content and not be frustrated. So I encourage you, especially it's this time of year when we're all focusing on, how was, 2022, what worked, what didn't. I want you to look at your processes. And I know if you're new, you're like, well, Crystal, I don't know. If you're getting into the groove of your content and you start seeing these things that aren't fun, take a pause. I know it may take you a little bit longer to do something, but take a pause and say, how can I fix this? What can I do a little bit differently that would make this more fun? Or how can I outsource this to an app or some kind of tool? Or how can I outsource it to somebody that loves to do that kind of stuff? These are the questions that we need to ask, not just, oh my God, my content's not fun anymore, because that's why a lot of people quit. And this is what breaks my heart. This is what breaks my heart. This is why I'm telling you all of these things. It's not because I want you to hit the ground running. Yeah, it is. I want you to hit the ground running and love your content. But the truth is, and seasoned content creators will tell you, that the flame of the newness, right? Launching, getting it out into the world and putting it out there and being nervous about it and excited. It's like the honeymoon phase of your content wears off. And then the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month reality sets in. And if you are not having fun, it gets hard. It gets super, super hard. I feel like a content therapist, like almost like that's what I should call myself, even though I'm not a therapist or like of any kind whatsoever. Let me throw out that disclaimer right now, even though I don't think you need it because But if you aren't having fun in the relationship with your content, why would you keep doing it? If it's boring you, if it's overwhelming you, if it's frustrating you, why would you keep doing it? It sounds like a toxic relationship. You don't want to have a toxic relationship with your content. You want to have fun. You want it to be something that invigorates you and gives you energy and just like pumps you full of life. So consider that whenever you hit those roadblocks, be more self-aware and really pay attention to those like tells that you have when you're not having fun and ask, how can I make this better? How can I change this in some way? This was a really fun episode today. This was so good. I really wish I would have heard all of these things whenever I first started, but I'm paying it forward and giving you all of this advice because I wish someone would have told me back in the day. But that's all I have for you. So make sure you go check out the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 381. If this is your first time tuning in, make sure that you hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you would, please take a screenshot. I would love for you to tag me on Instagram. I'm at crystalprofitTX and share like one takeaway. What was the one thing that you heard in today's episode that really inspired you, or hopefully something that you're going to add into your content in 2023 and beyond? But that's all I have for you. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.